Hi, Vero. Ni-
Hello.
Nice to be here with you today. So, I
Stay
think
here too.
this is our first numinous realm video that we'll be doing. More to come, obviously. But I thought for this one we could just go over the articles that we produced, all the stories we've been tracking for the month of August, and just talk about what has unfolded, some of the insights that have come through, and we can just share any ideas for what we think maybe how these transits will continue to unfold into the future. So let's see. I think a huge topic that, I mean, well, there are definitely several that have come up, and maybe we can start with the sense of the Saturn-Neptune transit, and the theme around restraint and minimalism. I think the underconsumption core is a great area to start, and I will share my screen over here. So I thought maybe you want to just like give an overview again of what that was, how it relates to Saturn Neptune, and then I would also love to touch on maybe some of your thoughts on how this differs with the corp core um,
Mhm.
aesthetic, which was also Saturn Neptune.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what we see with underconsumption, I think for like it has several like facets of it that really speak to Saturn Neptune. For example, while it might not be super obvious that like the underconsumption core trend has like a spiritual tone to it, I do think that if you look deeper into it, sorry, um, it does have like this very like Saturn, focusing on Neptune, which is, like it has everything to do with the spiritual realm. Um, because of the fact that people are starting to become more conscious of what they consume, and they're starting to, yeah, just be more mindful and consuming less, or what's really like kind of like common with this trend is to, finish all your beauty or skincare, or just finish all your products before buying new ones. Kind of like, there's also like a thing in this trend that like a lot of people are saying like, oh, like normal people, actually consume like this, but because we've seen like overconsumption be like so prevalent during the last few years, most people have become like very like I don't want to say shopaholics, but like we've been consuming a lot, more than we used to like decades ago. So yeah, there is this tone of like uh, focusing on the things that you already have and not feeding to this addiction of like just buying things, all the time, basically. And I think even if it's not super obvious at first, this does mean that like people are sort of like looking inwards more, and maybe reconnecting with, their spirituality, or like with their inner kind of like self, like their inner thoughts, their feelings. And I think that has a lot to do with Saturn Neptune, because of, how Saturn tends to like really focus on, whatever it is touching, or be like really strict, sort of, like the Senex Saturn father figure. And I think there is a focus on, like our inner world and spirituality and all of that. And at the same time, I think similarly, as, shopping and consuming has become an addiction for, like our society, basically. Um, there is also something to say about Saturn restricting Neptune, which is the planet usually correlated with addictions. Um, so yeah, that's sort of the overview.
Yeah, that's really great. And maybe, yeah, before we go to the corp core, I think this really relates pretty deeply to this trend that has been unfolding, the sober curious trend, which is a high number of Gen Z, especially individuals, are choosing to now step away from alcoholic beverages and moving towards non-alcoholic beverages. There's the beer market. The non-alcoholic beer market has been growing, 163% increase in sales, and it's in a similar way to the underconsumption core, which is that, like what you mentioned, that sense of going inward, deeper into one's spirit, which is to do with Neptune. And that sense of Saturn comes in with restriction and constraint, as you mentioned as well. So with the underconsumption core, it's like, I love that image of the bag that we just saw over here. It's like, you can see it's totally used, even with shoes. That there's this sort of Saturnian, wabi sabi like feeling, where the Saturnian um uh the Saturnian, how should I say it, the lack of, the
Like,
imperfection, yeah, the imperfection of Saturn somehow is seen in a very beautiful, in a Neptunian way, as something that is beautiful, as something that is profound. It evokes this sense that there is a divine quality in that which is old, that which is really used. And so it's interesting to see that, two very different areas of life, fashion and drinking, yet there's this underlying quality there of Saturn Neptune, of restriction, of honoring spirit. So yeah, super interesting to see this trend unfold. And I wonder how you think this relates to then the corp core aesthetic, which is so different. And also, I would love for you to touch on, maybe, we're seeing all these different trends, right? You're tracking all these minor trends that are happening, especially on TikTok. Like we'll talk about the clown core as well in a moment, and then there's corp core, and then there's underconsumption core. So maybe you can touch a little bit on that idea as well. Like, why do you feel like there's so many different micro trends happening? And yeah, and then on this corp core aesthetic as well, and how that relates to the underconsumption core, or the idea of Saturn Neptune.
just before going into all of this, I just wanted to say I didn't think about Wabi Sabi, like kind of like how Wabi Sabi is very, Saturn Neptune and also like correlates with these trends. So yeah, that's beautiful. Um, but yeah, so um, firstly, I just want to say quickly, I don't know if there are any trances, like I haven't truly like looked up like really a lot into it. Maybe you have like some better ideas of like what transits this like the sorry, I've never phrased this, but yeah, I haven't looked up if there are any transits that are causing the microtrends. But I think maybe we'll touch upon that later or like in future episodes. But I think this is actually sort of going away because of Saturn Neptune, like because we're starting this transit, we're slowing down. We'll see the theme of slowing down a lot, or like valuing kind of like long-term things more because of Saturn. And even Neptune is kind of like a slow planet, so it's like this very slow energy coming together. Um, but yeah, I think maybe there were transits that were causing like in this last few years to everything be like super fast and come really easily. I mean, come really fast and then go just as fast. And I think I can think of all the Uranus transits we've been having to also cause this because of, how Uranus is always causing like very fast, quick changes. But yeah, that's what I would say. But I like from the research that I've done for these last few articles, I do think that uh, like trend of microtrends basically is starting to fade off, and we'll see more like long-term trends, hopefully. Um, but yeah, also the corporate chic aesthetic or corpcore trend is also very Saturn Neptune, and I think it is similar to the underconsumption core trend in that it is also kind of like glamorizing or romanticizing Saturn, which in this case we see Saturn as kind of like the office attire or the office look, the corporate life. We've been seeing these elements of, like corporate office attire coming to like trend in the fashion world. Um, and it is also probably differently to the underconsumption core trend. It is also very Saturn-Neptune in that we've been seeing this as a sort of like coping mechanism for Gen Zers who are starting to go into offices to work after the pandemic to sort of like cope with their day-to-day lives and romanticize them a bit more because we've had like very casual attire before this trend that we wear to the office. We've been starting to see people, like dress up a lot more and kind of like have fun with their office clothes, which is something that we wouldn't have thought before. And also blending more like edgy and fashionable, like traditionally fashionable things with, office attire to also have more fun with their working fashion or working clothes. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I love that sense of romanticizing Saturn. That's like a really great Saturn-Neptune phrase or an idea there that you're sharing, which can totally be seen in the underconsumption core, as well as the sober curious, which is that sense of um, moving away from addictions and illusions. So it's very interesting because it could be that one is deepening into that world by honoring the world of Neptune and bringing more of that in, or it could also be the opposite, which is like negating the world of Neptune, or there could be a blend in which both come through. What I love about this image here is that her hair is kind of messy on top, again evoking a bit of that Saturnian imperfection. um so it but somehow the whole tone of it has a bit of uh, a Neptunian um, uh, tone, in that sense that it's muted, the grays, the whites, the blacks. But I also wonder, if you're able to, like, touch on this. Do you see um any in any way that it's related to some Saturn Pluto elements as well, or how would you differentiate this from Saturn Pluto? Because we often also see Saturn Pluto periods in which the the clothes get a little bit more masculine, because Saturn Pluto is that sense of having to deal with hardship. So there's inevitably some kind of masculine sense of being that comes through. I mean, the most recent Saturn Pluto was during COVID. So it's interesting because we were all at home, so our attire was maybe not so crisp in that sense, because it was hidden. It was all at home. Again, that sense of Pluto is also what's underground. So I just wonder, what are your thoughts on how this may differ from a Saturn Pluto look? Do you see anything here that maybe you can help share? Like, what exactly are the Neptunian elements?
Yeah, so what comes to mind, and it's what we've been talking about, is, kind of like the difference between, Saturn Neptune, that it romanticizes Saturn, and then I believe in the Saturn Pluto time that we just had, during COVID. um, it was definitely not about romanticizing Saturn at all. Like, I think we were just all going through it, and it showed, in a very Saturn Pluto way. I think our clothes were very much about, like, even if they were not super like restrictive or, harsh or anything that you would associate with Saturn-Pluto. I think it was more about the fact that everything had to be very realistic, and that everything that we were wearing was like very much uh just to like kind of like fit our day-to-day activities and to be at home. I don't know, it's something that you would probably not expect during a Saturn Pluto time, but yeah, I would say that all the trends that we were having were not about romantic, how do you say it, like um idealizing anything. It was more about, having to cope, with the Saturn Pluto
Hmm.
realities that we were facing. And now with Saturn Neptune, it's like we don't have COVID, or not as much as we used to anymore. And we can have Neptune in that, um, dressing up and, almost like playing a character and romanticizing, Saturn, which, I mean, I don't think anyone wanted to romanticize Saturn, like the Saturn archetype during COVID, because we were like dealing with it in a very like intense Plutonian matter. But also like, something that I see with, this aesthetic and just during these times with fashion with Saturn Neptune is that like you have like this quality of blending boundaries, which is
Hmm.
Saturn, which I think we can see like perfectly in this image. Like it's something that we've seen, I think, in fashion for probably like a few years now, but it's like doing things that you would not expect that would not expect that go together. Or yeah, let me rephrase that. It's like putting things together that you would not expect to see them together, or in a way that you would not expect to see them. And I think this outfit really like um kind of like portrays that, because you have like the very like um formal office attire, but then you have like the messy hair, and then you have like the tights, like how do you say, like um
It's it's like on the outside rather than
on the
on
outside,
the,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
on the outside of the sweater. And yeah, it's just like weird, like Neptunian, like foggy boundaries that we were not doing before.
Yes, yes, I really appreciate that, that sense of things that are usually not together are somehow blending together. So there's a sense in which it feels nice and soft, but then at the same time it's also maybe evoking a sense of, huh, that's a bit weird, or that's a bit odd, because Neptune has that sense of fuzziness, as you say, and Saturn in its nature is also imperfect, so you're going to kind of question it in that fuzzy Saturn Neptune way. So even with the sober curious movement, it's as though one would be surprised by the fact that it's actually the youth who are shifting towards this no drinking trend. One would expect it to be the older generation, but surprisingly it's the youngest generation that's able to drink, is moving away from it. So again, it's that kind of interesting, quirky, and maybe it has to do with the fact that Neptune is also in a sextile to Uranus, so there's a bit of that Uranian funniness, quirkiness that's entering the field at the same time. um let's see. So
Absolutely.
I think I also, we touched on the sense of the micro trends, and I agree with you. I think it has to do with Uranus. I mean, that sense, and also maybe Uranus Pluto as a whole, because there's that sense in which it's like it just spreads around everywhere. A beer likes to say like Uranus Pluto is all about just throwing things onto the wall and seeing what works. So I think in that same way, um, we have this going on, but then we also have things like, we're coming out of it, but you touched on Brat summer. So I'd love if
Hmm.
you could just now swing the other way, and let's talk about Uranus Pluto, which is the trine, the 120-degree alignment, which is going to unfold until 2032, but also the Jupiter Uranus conjunction, which of course, it's sort of at its tail end now, but considering a 20-degree alignment, it's still a little bit active. So yeah, if maybe you could just touch on how this is very different, and how um, uh,
Yeah.
that switch from Brat summer to demure fall is so
Yeah.
perfectly capturing this transition to Saturn, Jupiter Uranus to Saturn Neptune.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think unless we've been like you've been living under a rock, like I think we've all heard of Brad Summer. But just to recap, Charlie XCX, who has been a singer for I think more than a decade now, she she was really popular during like the early 2010s because her song, for example, Boom Clap, one of her songs during those times, was featured in The Fault in Our Stars, which was a very popular movie. And then, yeah, she had like a few hits. Also, I Love It with Icona Pop was super popular, and it still sort of is. It like you still hear it everywhere. But then she sort of had like a very I want to say a rebrand, but more than a rebrand, she had like a shift in, um, in her art or in her um, artistry, and she began working in 2015 with Sophie and AJ Cook, which are two British producers. Um, and she began, doing this very like experimental and cutting edge and avant-garde type of music, which in very broad terms we now call hyperpop, is the term that we use for the sort of pop that her and other people in PC music, which is the I think it's like a record label that AJ could had for a few years. Other people came out of that record label, and they all have like this very unique sound, which is hyperpop. And so Charlie after that was not as famous as she used to be in the early 2010s, but she was, she had like a very cult following. So while she was not super mainstream, she had a very like super dedicated following with like within the queer community and with the partying community, like within the party scene. She was like really like a very influential person, but she was just not, mainstream, or she was not like this huge pop star. She was still very influential and very popular within, her community. But then this year, she released this album, Brat, which is very both Jupiter, Uranus, and Uranus-Pluto, and we'll touch upon that. But all of a sudden, with this album, she like skyrocketed, and she is now everywhere. You see her everywhere, and everyone was talking about Brat like for months, and everything was Brat, and everything was about it, and everything was green. So it was like this huge phenomenon. And I mean, I won't touch upon that as much, but I think it had a lot to do with the marketing that she did for the album. And what's very interesting about, I think, like a huge part of the marketing is the album cover that you can see there, which is it has like this very like weird lime green color that is almost like off-putting, and this very simple blurry like font. I don't know if you want to touch upon that. I think you could probably say it a little bit better than I could, but I see a lot of Uranus Pluto in, the cover. Um, we also did a reference to Kanye West's cover for The Life of Pablo that was also very similar, or has like the similar kind of like uh font, and then like the bright color as like in the back. I don't know how to say it. Uh, but yeah, it has like this like unusual weird Uranian quality with, this like Plutonian simplicity, or like simplicity that is like at the same time like intense. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think it's that the same sans serif font which during the 2010s Uranus Pluto, I think Helvetica like really blew up, and you can see this in the change of fonts with especially with luxury brands like Burberry. They changed their font to a some very like modern like sans serif font, like a Helvet. I don't know what font it was, but so many luxury brands just during that Uranus Pluto square made simplified it, so that they could reach the masses. Basically, it was a very Uranus Pluto move, that direct immediacy, the power of that immediacy, Uranus Pluto. That's what this is really about. And I think it's so brilliant, this album cover, and especially during the Jupiter Uranus. I mean, the way that she blew up, everyone's like Brat somewhere. It truly captured the zeitgeist, and it went global. And
Yeah.
the aesthetics have carried it so brilliantly over here. And I love that you showcase this as well. Similarly, Kanye is just very Uranus Pluto figure in that way. So yeah, very cool. I think this is such a drastically different vibe than compared to the Saturn Neptune, which was happening at the same time. And so we see the demure fall now coming up as a
Hmm.
as a new trend, right? Everyone's moving on from the Brat summer, and we're heading into demure fall. So this is just one of the memes that I came across. Even here, I mean, I know this is not the same font that she used, but they're trying to carry that
Yeah.
sort of bright, loud. The lime green is still there, and now it's like heading into a bit more of this, beige tone, which is very Saturn Neptune. I mean, you can just see this vibe here. It's so different. It just so perfectly captures that sense of
Yeah.
mindful, which is very Saturn Neptune, and that very zen, understated, compared to very loud, very bright Jupiter Uranus feeling here. So yeah, I think it's interesting because Saturn Neptune will be dominating the next couple of years, but at the same time we still have Uranus Pluto unfolding. So I wonder what your what you feel about that, because you did mention that you feel like the trends will be softening. That sense of the micro trends may soften in the next few years. So how do you see the Uranus Pluto maybe interacting with that, if
Yeah.
you have any?
So yeah, I was gonna say like it's really interesting. For example, with the meme that you shared, that we have like this Brat summer vibe, and then we have the mirror uh vibe. And I think it's something that we will see. I mean, from what I see from the research that I've done, it's something that, as you said, it's happening simultaneously. And I think that even though Jupiter Uranus, as you said, is, how do you say, like, oh, we're gonna be over with that transit soon, or it's starting to fall off. We still have Uranus Pluto, and I think honestly, something that I love about how Brat Summer and the Mirror, I think it's just like the Mirror. I don't know if it has like any other word in the trend, but just like the Mirror trends um, are happening at the same time, is that I think we've seen this trend of, I don't know if I think it was probably Saturn Pluto that kind of like catapulted this trend of like quiet luxury or clean girl, which I think is very the demure. Um, but there was like almost like a missing representation for girls who don't fit into, or people in general who don't fit into, that aesthetic. Um, And I think that even though Brat can seem a little bit, like a core, like this very short-lived trend, I think the aesthetic, which is very in this list, which is another topic that we covered, is I think it's gonna be here to stay at least for a while, and because it also ties to the underconsumption trend, as in this list is very much about um, reusing, old clothes and buying vintage and having this like worn off look that we saw, for example, like with the bag that's very in this list and that's at the same time very Brat. And actually in this list article that I wrote how Charlie is kind of like a proponent for, I mean, sorry, it was in the underconsumption core, but yeah, Charlie is a proponent of the underconsumption trend, as
Hmm.
she said that she thinks that her like unpopular fashion opinion is that one should wear things to death. So it's just very funny how like Brad Summer and then in this list and then underconsumption all correlate. And then we have like this demure uh trend that while it's very different, I think it could also work very well with the underconsumption trend in the fact that, it's basically wearing like very classic, very timeless things that you could buy vintage very easily, or really quality things that you could have for a long time. So yeah, I think interesting. That was probably a lot. But yeah, interestingly, they all correlate in a weird way. And even though they seem very differently, or very different, sorry, it there's a way in which they are existing simultaneously, and I don't think either of them are going to fade away completely, at
Hmm.
least for some time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, there's so many transits happening all at once. So I think that sense of, micro trends may be related to a bit of that sense that there are multiple transits happening at once. So we have the Uranus-Pluto that's going to continue to unfold, which in itself carries that sense of, like we talked about earlier, Uranus-Pluto just like throwing things on the wall and seeing what will work. Many ideas, lots of ideas. So in itself, I think that is probably the micro trend transit. But then there'll be Saturn-Neptune things that we continue to see. Then obviously, and we'll touch on the nostalgia topic, which relates to also Saturn-Neptune, but more Uranus-Neptune as the sextile that's unfolding. And the last time we had a Uranus-Neptune transit was in the 90s, and of course, many people are talking about how the 90s are back. So there's all these transits unfolding, and so it's really hard to say that, because the reason why I want to talk about this is because maybe let's say those who are not so astrologically inclined, or maybe a bit more on the skeptical side, maybe like, well, you're saying that this is what's happening right now, Saturn Neptune, it's a demure fall, but then you're also saying there's like a trend of people wearing their underwear, which is very Uranus Pluto. So what is happening? Like, it seems very inconsistent, but it's actually not, because there are so many transits happening at the same time, and you're just trying to gauge where it fits in, or like how it's evoking those transits. So I think Valerie's not here, but we would love to touch on some of the things that she also published, and I feel like this article is a bit similar to the Brat to Demure. It's about how artists are now creating these handwritten stamps, that say create that write created with human intelligence, because of course now AI is so mainstream. Everyone's doing everything with AI, creating things with AI. So this is a little creative thing, project that artists are working on to indicate that this was created with human intelligence. And so I feel like obviously the AI, um, um, uh, skyrocketing is so Jupiter Uranus. I mean, 1969 we had the moon landing, so there's that tendency of during Jupiter-Uranus moments for, first of all, many people to be using that technology, but also celebrating that technology, using it in many ways. So that has really occurred in the past year as this Jupiter-Uranus. And of course, the Uranus-Pluto transit is holding that larger story of how all of this will unfold. But this is a great Saturn-Neptune, trend that has now shown up as well, which is like going back to that imperfection of human creativity, Saturn, Neptune, really evoking that wabi sabi, as we talked about, the way that this looks, it is created with the human touch. So I love this piece and how, again, it relates to this totally unrelated, sober, curious, under consumption core, but it's there. You can see it. You can see the trend. You can see the underlying archetypal forces that are carrying all of this, of what's happening in society today. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. And then I think,
Oh,
okay, so
sorry if I can just say, yeah,
yes.
yeah. I was just gonna say, like as you said with Saturn Neptune, I don't remember about what you said this, but you used the phrase honoring the spirit, which I
Mhm.
think is very much, the human intelligence movement as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, totally. It is really about honoring the spirit. So then the other one is, okay, the total opposite of under consumption core is then the bozo chic clown core makeup, which you touched on. I would just, yeah, I'd love if you could open up into this now.
Sure. So, we've also seen this clown makeup trend. I think it started with Julia Fox last year. This is a great story actually. Last year she went to the White House, or I don't know if it was the White House, but she went to DC and she was, at a political event, and she, like, for several days she visited like different spots in Washington DC. And she was wearing like not only clown makeup but also like sort of like clown inspired look in general. And she said that it was kind of like to showcase how um the government, I don't remember the exact words, but it's like the government, how it resembles a circus right now. And she said that she's in her clown era because she was, visiting the Capitol. So it started with that, and as that happened, we've seen some other people do this, clown, especially in makeup, clown chic or clowncore trend. But then I think when it really like has like when it really peaked, and it's been peaking for a few months, is with Chapel Roan, which again I think she's been everywhere. Um, she is an artist who is famous for, like, one of the things that she's very famous for is her makeup, which is very inspired by not only by clowns but also by drag queens done drag makeup, which is like it's also very similar. It has this very like campy, exaggerated quality. The white face, and then like this very like bright colors and exaggerated features and all of that. And she's similarly to Charlie. She's blown up since her Coachella debut this last April. Um, yeah, because of her that she's blowing up. We've seen this clown makeup sort of infiltrate the fashion world and infiltrate the internet, and more we see people like emulating this style. Of course, a lot of people that go to Chapel's concerts also dress up similarly and do their makeup similarly to go to her concerts. So we've been seeing a lot of that, and that is, of course, not only Uranus-Pluto, which, Uranus-Pluto has a lot to do with the trickster um, archetype, which is basically the clown. Um, it's like this power to the Uranus, unconventional archetype. Um, and it's also very Jupiter-Uranus in the sense that, it's also, very Jupiterian, very lighthearted, clowns. I think this is sounding probably like very obvious, but clowns are, usually about, laughing and fun and yeah, just laughing, I guess. And then you have Uranus, which is very unconventional, which is also a quality of clowns. And yeah, again, the trickster archetype. So yeah, I think that it's very much correlated to those two archetypes.
Yeah, that sense of celebrating the trickster, I think, really comes through in this. And I love that you mentioned how the first English clown came to prominence during the
Oh yeah.
Uranus-Pluto opposition. And similarly, wrote this article about memes and the role they play, and court gestures as well. These sort of humorous individuals were very common in the Renaissance and medieval period. Help, like, just being a form of entertainment to these, like, kings and people who are higher up in the status. And so they too, like, this during the Renaissance period, which was Uranus-Neptune, but also Uranus-Pluto. There were a lot of those court jesters who did play a big part in society. And so I similarly, I talk about how these meme lords, and we have all these memes that we just touched on, the Brat, Summer to Demure Fall is a meme. I mean, everything is pretty much a meme nowadays, and that's how things become viral. I mean, this Olympics shooters one also really took off, and in that sense, it's like Uranus is the trickster. It's that cosmic trickster, but it also represents ideas. And so I think it's interesting that the more something is funny, the more it has a tendency to reach the masses, which is a Uranus Pluto quality, right? That sense of reaching the masses is that Pluto, that power of the humor, of the ideas. And so it's so interesting to see how the clown core makeup is such a powerful tool, that is similar to the way that memes are also being used to evoke a sense of power or to share a specific idea. I mean, with the clown core, it's like quite a significant message, right? Which is like they're defying a beauty standard. They're saying this is, we're laughing, we're making fun of what this traditional notion of beauty is, which is what really Uranus Pluto is about. I mean, it's totally about throwing this, demolishing the status quo and creating out of the mess, which is Pluto, something that is new, something that is refreshing, and often something that is funny.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it encapsulates it perfectly.
Yeah. So let's see. I think I want to. Yeah, there's quite a lot here. Obviously, Valerie wrote about the obviously the virtual avatars as well. In that sense, could be seen as a similar thing. It's that sense of more and more people, as they become content creators, there's this tension here about having to show your face versus not showing your face. So many people are now trending towards using a virtual avatar rather than putting their face in front of the camera. And so that too, it's like quite a in many ways, maybe a Uranus Pluto trend, because Pluto is also about the underground, things that are hidden. And Uranus is this, in the same way that it's a trickster. You're putting up this digital avatar. And avatar too is like Neptune in that sense, which is that it's an illusion. It's not actually real. So it's a very Uranus, Neptune, Pluto trend that this is showcasing right here, which is that you're not actually putting up something real. You're putting up something creative in order to hide the actual entity that's there, but it's still creating a lot of capacity to portray power and to share ideas. And so there's just all these creative ways in which the transits are unfolding. And so I think this goes to then the nostalgia trend that we've seen, and the indie sleaze maybe article that you wrote about, and how that relates to this idea. So yeah, Valerie touched on this main sense, that this feeling of nostalgia, but really it's turning into nostalgia where the old things are becoming new. And so they're creating this not just nostalgic feeling, but a nostalgic feeling. So a lot of things from the 90s seem to be coming back. I mean, obviously, the fact that people love to play their records rather than listening directly from their phone. It's like, trying to, again, that Saturn as well, like bringing in that wabi sabi, the imperfection, something that's old, something that really has quite a sincerity to it, bringing that into the focus of something that is new, and something that brings in a sense of gentle spirit, perhaps through that Neptunian realm. So I mean, it's very interesting that this is a major trend, and maybe you can touch on how that relates to the indie sleaze article that you wrote about. Obviously, another indie sleaze revival. This is another trend that seems to be unfolding. And I'll just say that living in New York and working in Soho, it's been so interesting. After you wrote this article, I actually see people cultivating this sort of revival. I'm genuinely seeing it. So it was very cool to
Wow.
I'm so glad you wrote this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I bet. I think, like, I'm glad that you guys are in New York, because I think that I mean, sorry, that New York is a place that, trends usually arrive fast, or like they arrive first in New York, than, in other places. And also people usually really care about how they dress. So I guess that at the same time, you can really see the trends in New York. So that's really cool. Um, but yeah, the Indies List revival, as you said, is of course very related to the nostalgia movement, in the sense that Indies List was a movement in the late 2000s, early 2010s, that now is having a revival. And while it is having a revival, we're also doing it in like our own Gen Z, like new way. Again, nostalgia very much. Um, and yeah, so we've been seeing, for example, the music come back in some sense. After COVID, after the pandemic, we didn't have that much of a nightlife, or not after, but like during the pandemic and during COVID, we didn't have much of a lifestyle. I mean, more of a nightlife. And then now after that, we're starting to revive, the nightlife. And for some reason or another, the music from the early 2010s is sort of having a comeback, or like the style of music. We have people like the Dare, which is a very popular DJ and musician. He's actually based in New York, that he's now seen as the face of the indie sleaze movement. And he has this sound that is very reminiscent of that time. And his parties, he does these parties called Frequencies in New York. He started a few years ago with this. They kind of like emulate the style of like this very like wild partying and also the very famous photographer from the 2010s, the Cobra Snake, who had a blog in which he would post, the pictures of the people partying during those times. He's also having a comeback, and he's actually, I don't know if friends, but like he works with the there and in those parties. And then Charlie, like Sex, who we talked about with Brad Summer, had her birthday party. I think it was like a month ago, and she had like this in this list sort of themed birthday party, and the Cobra Snake was there, and one was taking pictures, in this like flash photography sort of way that was very popular back then, like these messy party pictures, which a lot of people say that look very staged because they're very like thought, like compared to the actual in this list time, we're actually thinking about how we're emulating the Indie style. So a lot of people say that they don't look very genuine, but that's up to everyone to sort of like think about. But yeah, we also have seen the in this list revival in, for example, the movie Saltburn, which is a 27 period piece, and we specifically have the character Venetia, I think, and that's her name. And she's like the epitome of being this Lee style with like the roots that are showing that was very popular back then, and then the grungy makeup, which again it correlates with Brad Summer. I think the aesthetic of Brad Summer is very in this list, so those two trends or those two movements overlap in some ways. Um, and yeah, I think, one more important thing to point out is that we correlate this trend with Saturn-Neptune. And interestingly, during the start of the original in this list, we were also in a Saturn-Neptune period. And we usually correlate Saturn-Neptune periods with financial struggles. And it is like very significant of being this list period, the original one, that we were in a recession, in an economic recession when the this list movement happened. And now we're starting to see potentially the beginnings of another economic recession, or at least there's a lot of talk about of like economic struggles and potential economic recession. So that is like a huge overlap. And as I said, the this movement can be correlated in some ways to the underconsumption core, in that it is, this very warming look. It's very much about thrifting and buying vintage and really like wearing your clothes, not looking super perfect. It's almost like the antithesis to like the late 2010s, in which like everything had to be like super polished. Um, so yeah, in the same way, we're seeing this recession pop with Charlie and with Sabrina and with Addison Rae, who's also kind of like another face of the In This List movement right now. And how, during those times, we also had recession pop with, Lady Gaga or Katy Perry or other artists that we deem as, like perfect recession pop. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool, and I can see how it totally relates to the underconsumption core idea of like, yeah, wearing things till they're till to death. I love that phrase, wear your clothes to death. And yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. So this early 2000s period was also like quite a heavy period, because there was like a Saturn Uranus, as well as like a Saturn Pluto and a Saturn Neptune, all like Saturn touching all those outer planets, and so it definitely created quite a moment, in that sense, that Saturn Uranus is always about the collapse of institutions. Not always, but there's a sense in which that does happen. Most recently, we had the Saturn square Uranus from 2021 to 2023, and we did see many banks collapse. Also, the crypto world had its major collapse. And then with Saturn Pluto, we do see a lot of bigger major economic crisis. Obviously, with COVID, there was a different kind of crisis. But I think it's interesting. I mean, that sense of recession, that word, it does feel a bit Saturn Neptune more than Saturn Pluto. So I find it quite interesting that it does have that tone to it. And so um I'm not so sure if people are a bit confused, like, is it going to happen, is it not going to happen, which again, it is that very Saturn Neptune quality of not knowing. If we go back to that, even the corp core aesthetic, there was that sense of you're not so sure, like she has her tights on the outside, it's a bit confusing, there's still some kind of properness there, but it's a bit confusing what is happening. So very interesting to see that unfolding in the economic world as well. And I think, yeah, overall, it's that sense of the a move towards the spirit of things is definitely quite loud, I would say, through these articles that you focus on indie sleaze and underconsumption. And I think it does relate to this other article that I wrote, which is not, I think it 100% could also be, very Saturn Neptune, though I focused a little bit more on the Uranus Neptune side of things, and how it relates to the history of AI development. Artificial intelligence, that word, that sense of artificial is very Neptune, because you're not so sure, is it real, is it not? And then intelligence has this very Uranian quality to it. It's very it's just intelligent, it has all the ideas. So that word, that phrase itself is very Uranus Neptune. But this article is surround it's focused on this new AI gadget that looks a lot like the Tamagotchi, which, by the way, I think the founder has said, it kind of got a bit of inspiration from there. But also this, the earlier iMac G3s, it has that sort of very rounded, smooth quality, just like very Neptunian. Neptune also has that sense of being see-through, but it's also playful with the neon colors, like that Uranian side. And if we go back to Brat, the album cover, it has a very neon color, touch to it. So that's that very Uranian quality over here. And this is probably going to continue to unfold, this story of AI, which I believe can be seen through all the lens of Uranus. I mean, we have the Uranus-Pluto, which is that it's democratizing access to technology. It's giving it to the masses. So everyone can use AI now, like, anyone, literally. That's the Uranus-Pluto. The Jupiter-Uranus is that it's like a sudden boom, a sudden spread. So it's happened immediately in this moment. And Uranus-Neptune, I think, especially because it's a sextile, it's a bit more subtle, it's in the background, but it seems to be blending into our spirit, and there's a sense in which the technology and our way of life, there's a sense of ease that's coming into it. But there's the blurred lines are also beginning to form, right? It's like, if you give this spirit to technology, then what happens? All these other, the shadow starts to emerge, and that is something that we have to look at as we continue to develop our relationship with technology. But this also, just in that nostalgia trend, it does really fit in well, because it is evoking these, especially from the 90s, both these technologies. This new friend AI is evoking that sense of nostalgia. Hey, this feels like something I know from a long time ago, but it's also new. So very interesting. I think we're going to see a lot more of that with the Saturn Neptune as well, because Saturn Neptune has that quality of nostalgia, and Valerie touched on this really nicely, which is in the movie Inside Out 2, which, by the way, if you have not seen, highly recommend it. uh, had this cute character called Nostalgia, which was not there in the first movie. So again, that Saturn-Neptune reference was
Hmm.
quite brilliant. So yeah, I think with nostalgia, there is the play of Uranus that's going to be there. So it's very interesting to see all of this unfold. So yeah, I don't know if there's. I think that was really the main idea. Well, lastly, I just want to say that the way that we talked about Saturn Neptune, and this transit is going to continue to tighten as things unfold. So we'll definitely be seeing a lot more stories and articles around that. But one last thing I wanted to touch on was this piece that I wrote about in terms of conspiracy theories. This film, Fly Me to the Moon, first of all, carries that Jupiter-Uranus uh, um, transit, because we landed on the moon in 1969 during a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, similar to our current moment. But the movie focuses on this idea of like the conspiracy theories that came after the actual moon landing. People started questioning, did it actually happen? So this film was a bit of a play on that. And obviously very interesting that it got released during Jupiter, Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, because there was another film that was very related to Jupiter, Uranus, the moon landing, which was Hidden Figures. And I think that came out during the Jupiter, Uranus 2013. I can't remember, but it was during a Jupiter, Uranus. So we can see these dialectical trends in a very clear way. But the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I think we're definitely going to see a lot more conspiracy theories, and it is that sense of the blurring of what is real, Saturn, and what is illusion, Neptune. And similar to, we touched on the corp core, it's like you're not really sure what it is. There's like a sense of realness there, but there's also like, is that how it's supposed to be? I'm not so sure. So there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of uncertainty in the air with Saturn, Neptune. But I think in order to navigate these waters for the next couple of years, yeah, I think going back to that sense of honoring spirit, but also the other way around, which is to cultivate space, nurture matter, both ways. So I don't know, Veronica, if you have, sorry, I think I was like rambling on there for a moment, but if you have any thoughts, any advice, obviously we'll be touching on Saturn, Neptune a lot more. But if you have any sort of, as a Saturn, Neptune yourself, if you have any advice on how to navigate this transit, we're going to be with it until 2027. So yeah, if you want to just share some of your thoughts. Oops, I think I lost you there. All right. Well, no worries. I think we're still figuring out some technical stuff. This is our first video, but we'll definitely make things better as we go along. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any suggestions, any ideas, any anything at all you think you'd love to hear from us, just shoot it in the comments, and we'll do our best to continue delivering great content to you. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.